The city below, a pulsing, indifferent beast of glass and steel, was my daily escape. From the sterile height of my office window, it was a tapestry of distant lives, a comforting blur of anonymity. My own existence, a predictable loop of spreadsheets and lukewarm coffee, felt safely insulated from its raw energy. But some afternoons, the veil thinned. Some afternoons, the city revealed a truth I wasn't meant to see. It started subtly, as all seismic shifts do. A glint of polished black, a sleek, predatory silhouette easing to the curb with a silence that screamed expense. Not a typical cab, not a frantic delivery van. This was a chariot of power, a hushed promise of consequence. My breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp that no one in the bustling open-plan office would ever notice. My gaze, usually detached, sharpened, fixed. Then he emerged. A man, not just stepping out, but unfurling from the car's dark interior like a shadow given form. He moved with a devastating economy of motion, each stride a declaration of dominion. The chaos of downtown traffic, the incessant blare of horns, the cacophony of 1,000 hurried footsteps. It all seemed to cower, to soften, to fall into an unnatural quiet around him. He didn't just walk, he commanded the very air, bending it to his will. A shiver, sharp and unwelcome, traced its way down my spine. It was a jolt, an electric current of unsettling curiosity that jolted me from my detached observation into something far more dangerous. His presence was a physical force, palpable even through layers of glass and concrete, tugging at something deep and dormant within me. My heart began to thrum a rhythm that felt entirely new, entirely illicit. His suit, a masterpiece of charcoal wool, hugged a frame that hinted at latent strength, tailored to perfection yet radiating an edge of danger, a hidden blade. His driver, a hulking, silent sentinel, remained by the open door, eyes scanning the street with an almost predatory vigilance. And pressed to his ear, a device that whispered of encrypted secrets, of a world operating in shadows, far removed from the mundane anxieties of my own. It wasn't just a phone, it was a conduit to a life of calculated risks and untamed power. My fingers tightened involuntarily on the cool glass of the windowpane, my knuckles white. This man, a fleeting image in the urban sprawl, had ignited a spark that threatened to consume me. It was a strange, forbidden fascination, a perverse pull towards the very darkness he embodied. A forbidden curiosity, sharp and insistent, telling me that this man was trouble, a dangerous beautiful storm. And yet, I couldn't tear my eyes away. I didn't want to. I wanted to drown in the mystery of him, even if it meant losing myself completely. The air in the gallery was a tapestry of hushed clinks, the drone of polite conversation, and the subtle scent of expensive perfume mingling with the faint tang of oil paint. Weeks had dissolved into a blur of client meetings and calculated smiles, each day a careful performance of competence and detachment. My heels clicked a steady rhythm on the polished floor, a counterpoint to the superficial chatter that swirled around me. I was good at this, navigating the labyrinthine world of high society, orchestrating connections, making others shine. Yet, tonight, a restless current hummed beneath my practiced composure, a faint echo of something missing. A hunger I refused to name. My gaze drifted, not truly seeking, but scanning the familiar faces, the predictable gestures. And then, the world tilted. Across the cavernous room, framed by a swirl of power brokers and glittering socialites, he stood. Marco. The name whispered itself in the silent chambers of my mind, a forbidden word. He was no longer a shadow on a rain-slicked street, but a formidable presence, a dark star at the heart of a different constellation. His suit, impeccably tailored, seemed to absorb the ambient light, accentuating the raw, untamed power that vibrated from him. He moved with an effortless grace that belied the stillness in his eyes, a predator in a tailored cage. My breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp that no one heard amidst the din. It felt as if a silent, invisible tether had snapped taut between us. His head lifted, almost imperceptibly, as if drawn by an unseen force. And then, his eyes found mine. Across the polished floors, over the heads of the chattering elite, through the veil of curated indifference, our gazes locked. It wasn't a glance, but an invasion. A molten current surged through me, bypassing all defenses, igniting a spark I hadn't known was merely dormant. The noise of the gallery faded, the faces blurred. There was only him, and the stark, electrifying intensity of his stare, a silent challenge, a promise of something dangerous and profound. It lasted only a heartbeat, but in that suspended moment, a lifetime unfolded. Then, a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of something unreadable, and he was once again the unapproachable enigma, a king amongst pawns. I forced myself to breathe, to turn, to feign interest in a piece of abstract art, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air felt charged, thick with an unspoken tension only I seemed to feel. I told myself it was mere coincidence, a trick of the light, a lingering memory. But the tremor in my hand, the lingering heat on my skin, betrayed the lie. My professional armor felt suddenly thin, vulnerable. A shadow fell across my shoulder. Lena Petrova, isn't it? The voice was smooth, cultured, entirely too close. I turned to face a man with shrewd eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Elias Thorne, I believe we have mutual acquaintances. Your work at Zenith Consultancies is quite remarkable, particularly your recent acquisition strategy for Sterling Inc. He paused, his gaze assessing, lingering. Marco mentioned you. Said you have a rather unique perspective. He's hosting a private viewing later this week at his estate. A more intimate gathering, away from the usual circus. Elias's smile widened, a knowing glint in his eyes. He specifically asked me to extend the invitation to you. He has a feeling you might appreciate art beyond the surface. The implication hung heavy in the air, a silken trap, a calculated move. Marco wasn't interested in fleeting glances, he was playing a much deeper, much more dangerous game. And suddenly, the thought of walking away felt impossibly dull. The darkness he offered, it called to a darkness within me I'd long suppressed. The city bled light below me, a sprawling, indifferent tapestry of ambition and shadow. But up here, in Marco's world, everything was hushed, gilded, a whisper of power so profound it hummed in the very air. The penthouse, a cathedral of glass and steel, felt less like a room and more like a gilded cage, each guest a perfectly polished ornament. I was an intruder, a stark note of reality in a symphony of curated illusion, yet a strange, dangerous excitement thrummed beneath my skin. Then he appeared, not a grand entrance, but a shift in the air, a gravitational pull that drew every eye, including mine, against my will. Marco. He moved through the hushed throng like a predator in his own domain, his presence a palpable force that bent the light around him. My breath caught, a silent, traitorous gasp. He was a myth made flesh, and his eyes, when they finally found mine across the expanse of polished marble, were twin points of obsidian fire. A shiver, unwelcome and electrifying, traced a path down my spine. He approached slowly, deliberately, each step a testament to his unyielding control. The murmurs around us faded, replaced by the frantic beating of my own heart. He stopped inches from me, close enough for me to discern the faint, expensive scent of his cologne, a primal musk interwoven with something sharp, like regret and power. Lena, his voice was a low growl, a rumble that resonated deep within my chest, vibrating through my very bones. I knew you'd be here. A simple statement, yet it felt like a declaration, a claim. My carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. Mr. Volkov, I managed, my voice a fragile reed against his thunder. He offered a ghost of a smile, a dangerous curve of his lips. You have a remarkable mind, Lena. Your analysis of the market shifts last quarter, particularly discerning. His gaze was unnervingly direct, stripping away layers of my professional facade, seeing something raw and exposed underneath. Praise from him felt like a brand, searing and unforgettable. It was intoxicating, a validation I hadn't realized I craved, even as a warning bell screamed in the back of my skull. Thank you, I said, the words barely a breath. My intellect, my sharpest weapon, felt suddenly disarmed, laid bare for his inspection. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was meant only for me, yet seemed to echo through the vast space. I have an opportunity for you. A consulting role, for one of my less public ventures. A shell company, you understand. Minimal oversight. Generous compensation. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Shell company. Minimal oversight. Generous compensation. A siren song, laced with poison. My analytical mind, the very thing he praised, immediately catalogued the risks. The moral tightrope I'd be forced to walk. The murky legality. The complete surrender to his world. This wasn't just a job. It was an invitation to the dark heart of his empire. A dangerous dance on the edge of an abyss. Every fiber of my being screamed no. Every carefully constructed boundary I'd ever erected threatened to collapse. But then, there was him. The sheer, magnetic force of his presence, the dangerous glint in his eyes that promised not just money, but a thrill so potent it could consume me whole. The forbidden allure of it, the intoxicating pull of his immense, terrifying power, was a current I felt dragging me under. To refuse would be to step back into the mundane, into the safe, into the colorless existence I had so carefully built. To accept would be to ignite a fire I might never extinguish. My breath hitched. The choice wasn't just about a job. It was about choosing a life, or perhaps, choosing a glorious, perilous descent. And God help me, it was becoming incredibly, impossibly hard to say no. The lie was a whisper at first, a delicate deception I wove for myself, for the last vestiges of the woman I used to be. Temporary, I'd promised, a means to an end. But even as the words formed, a tremor of illicit excitement shivered through me, a dark counterpoint to the frantic clang of every alarm bell in my soul. Marco's offer wasn't merely a lifeline, it was a silken snare, dropped with such casual grace, such knowing precision, that I walked right into it, my eyes wide open, my heart already beating a dangerous rhythm. His world beckoned, a gilded cage I was inexplicably drawn to. The address he'd given me led not to some shadowy back alley, but to a pristine, anonymous skyscraper, its glass facade reflecting the indifferent city like a polished obsidian mirror. Inside, the air was cool, sterile, scented faintly with expensive cleaner and the sharp tang of something indefinable, power, perhaps, or imminent transgression. The elevator hummed, a silent ascent into a realm where the rules I knew simply ceased to exist. The office itself was a study in minimalist menace. Walls of pale concrete, floors of seamless gray epoxy, bathed in the cool, even glow of recessed lighting. No personal touches, no warmth, just sleek, functional furniture that seemed to melt into the environment. It was a place designed for efficiency, for discretion, for secrets. Here, a quiet hum permeated the silence, a low thrum that vibrated through the soles of my shoes, a living pulse beneath the polished surface. It was the sound of an operation running with the terrifying precision of a well-oiled, deadly machine. The staff were ghosts of efficiency, moving with hushed purpose. Eyes met mine briefly, then slid away, betraying nothing. Burner phones lay on stark desks, their screens dark, their purpose chillingly clear. Conversations were clipped, coded, words stripped of all unnecessary meaning, leaving only the skeletal framework of illicit business. I was handed a thick stack of documents, financial reports so obscure, so layered with shell companies and untraceable assets, they felt like physical manifestations of the shadows I was stepping into. My task? To unravel the intricate web, to make sense of the deliberately nonsensical. My fingers traced the figures, the complex algorithms designed to obscure, not reveal. Each number, each line of text, hummed with a dangerous energy, a forbidden knowledge that seeped into my skin. It was frightening, yes, this quiet conspiracy I was now a part of, but beneath the fear, an unsettling thrill began to bloom. It was the heady rush of standing at the precipice, of looking into the abyss and finding a strange, dark beauty there. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about the seduction of the forbidden, the intoxicating power of being privy to what was meant to remain hidden. Marco's presence, though absent, was everywhere. In the hushed efficiency, in the cold precision, in the very air I breathed. This world, his world, was a velvet shroud descending around me, muffling the cries of my conscience, sharpening my senses to the dangerous allure of his orbit. I was stepping over the line, not just into illegality, but into a deeper, more profound surrender. And with every meticulously analyzed report, with every quiet hum of the illicit operation, I felt myself drawn further, irrevocably, into the dark heart of it all. The late hour had settled over the office like a velvet shroud, muffling the distant city hum, leaving only the soft click of my keyboard and the even softer whisper of my own breath. A deceptive peace. I'd grown accustomed to these silent nights, to the quiet hum of Marco's presence just beyond the heavy oak door of his private office. A strange, dangerous comfort had begun to bloom in my chest, a fragile, forbidden flower nurtured by his intense gaze, the accidental brush of his hand, the charged atmosphere that always crackled between us. I was falling, slowly, irrevocably, into the intoxicating darkness of him. Then, the sharp, insistent trill of his phone shattered the illusion. A jolt went through me, an immediate tightening in my gut. He answered almost instantly, his voice a low murmur I couldn't quite decipher, a private conversation I knew I shouldn't be privy to. But the door, usually a fortress, was ajar tonight, a sliver of light and sound escaping into the hushed corridor. I froze, my fingers suspended over the keys, my heart suddenly thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. His tone had shifted. Gone was the smooth, commanding baritone I knew. This was something colder, sharper, a blade of sound slicing through the quiet. Problematic assets, he said, the words cutting through the air like ice shards. My blood ran cold. Assets. Not people, not lives, but assets. The detachment in his voice was a physical blow. It was the calmest voice I'd ever heard him use, yet it chilled me to the bone, devoid of any discernible emotion. No anger, no frustration, just a chilling, clinical assessment. Then, the second phrase, delivered with the same terrifying serenity, the usual solutions have been initiated. My breath hitched, catching somewhere in my throat, a knot of pure dread. Solutions. The word hung in the air, heavy and menacing, painting a stark, terrifying picture without ever needing to utter a single violent detail. My mind reeled, conjuring images I desperately wanted to dismiss, scenes of ruthlessness and finality that made my stomach churn. This wasn't just business, this was something darker, something predatory, something that trafficked in the very lives of others. The man who had looked at me with such intensity, whose presence could ignite a searing heat through my veins, whose touch I craved with a desperate hunger, was capable of this. This chilling, almost casual cruelty. The realization was a tidal wave, crashing over me, dragging me down into an abyss of fear and fascination. How could the same hands that had almost grazed mine with such tender promise be the ones that signed off on solutions? A tremor ran through me, a primal instinct screaming for me to flee, to run as far and as fast as I could from the terrifying truth of the man in the next room. Yet, beneath the terror, a strange, perverse curiosity began to stir. A dark, illicit thrill that warred violently with every fiber of my being. This was the true Marco, unvarnished, unmasked. The predator. And I, like a moth to a deadly flame, found myself not repulsed enough to turn away, but drawn, deeper, into the menacing glow of his power. The click of the phone echoed, then the muffled scrape of a chair. The conversation was over. The silence that followed was no longer peaceful, but thick with unspoken threats, with the chilling echo of his words. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. The world had tilted on its axis, and I was standing on the precipice, staring into an abyss I now knew was far, far deeper than I had ever imagined. The attraction remained, a perverse, dangerous pull, but now it was laced with a raw, terrifying knowledge. I was falling for a shadow, and the shadow, I now understood, had very sharp teeth. The chill that had seeped into my bones after the recent violent crescendo lingered, a phantom touch of fear against my skin. My breath still hitched, a ragged whisper in the cavernous silence of his luxurious lair, a silence that felt heavier, more suffocating than any scream. I waited, braced for the usual dismissive glance, the impatient sigh that would remind me of my place. A witness, a pawn, insignificant. But Marco didn't turn away. He didn't even look angry. Instead, a hand, so deceptively gentle yet possessing the strength of a predator, found the small of my back. It was a possessive gesture, drawing me not just physically closer, but pulling at the very fabric of my being. The heat of his palm burned through the delicate silk of my dress, a brand against my skin that promised both protection and inescapable ownership. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, echoing the terror that still vibrated through my nerves. His scent, leather, expensive cologne, and something primal, dangerous, enveloped me, a potent drug that both repelled and captivated. He leaned in, his voice a low, gravelly murmur that seemed to vibrate directly into my soul, bypassing my ears altogether. "This life, Lena," he began, his gaze piercing mine, revealing a fleeting, carefully constructed vulnerability I'd never imagined possible. "It's a constant war. Every shadow a potential enemy, every alliance a fragile thread." His thumb brushed a slow, hypnotic circle on my back, a simple motion that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats and promises. The burden, it's a heavy crown. Loneliness, a constant companion. And for a breath-stopping moment, he allowed me to see past the impenetrable facade, into a glimmer of the man beneath the monster. A carefully chosen confession, designed not to reveal true weakness, but to forge a unique, dangerous intimacy. He had chosen me to see this, to be privy to this sliver of his inner world, and the realization was a dizzying rush of illicit pride and profound terror. He was weaving a web, and I was already tangled in the first silken strands. "But some burdens," he continued, his eyes darkening, intensifying, "are eased by sharing. Some vulnerabilities demand a shield." He straightened, pulling me with him, our bodies brushing in an electric current that stole my breath. "You are more than a witness, Lena. You are invaluable." My mind reeled, trying to decipher the true meaning behind his honeyed words. Invaluable as a person? Or invaluable as a tool? "From now on," he declared, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument, "you will be closer. Safer. No longer just an observer, but a part of the design." My design. He had transformed my cage into a gilded throne, my prison into a sanctuary from the very dangers he controlled. He was offering me protection, yes, but also a deeper entanglement, a larger role in his dark empire. He was binding me, not with chains, but with the insidious threads of perceived importance, of unique access, of an undeniable, terrifying desire. My ethical boundaries, once so sharply defined, now felt like dissolving ink on a wet page. Guilt gnawed at me, a constant companion, but it was overshadowed by a complex cocktail of emotions. The fear of his world, yes, but also a strange, dangerous comfort in his proximity. A nascent thrill in being chosen. Desired. Indispensable to asterisk him. My heart ached with the weight of this moral compromise, yet pulsed with an undeniable, traitorous flutter of a dangerous longing. I was trapped, undeniably, completely. And in the terrifying depths of that entrapment, I found myself desiring the very chains that bound me. The screen glowed, a cool, indifferent sentinel in the hushed room, yet what it displayed was anything but. It was a searing brand, a white-hot truth that threatened to consume me. A dizzying cascade of numbers pulsed across the display, a silent testament to power, greed, and a world utterly beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. Each digit whispered of illicit fortunes, of shadow transactions woven into the very fabric of global finance. Marco's directive, delivered with that casual, terrifying authority that always seemed to hum beneath his skin, had been simple, chillingly so. Legitimize it. Create a digital ghost, a phantom trail so expertly crafted it would fool the most astute eyes. Turn black-white. Transmute pure sin into undeniable solvency. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling as if with a fever, yet the tremor resonated from a place far deeper than my skin. This wasn't merely data entry, it was an act of dark alchemy, a sacred, profane ritual. And in performing it, I was transmuting not just the money, but myself. Each keystroke would be a rivet, fastening a chain around my soul, binding me tighter to a destiny I had never chosen. I saw it with horrifying clarity, a vision that chilled me to the bone. The irreversible link. This wasn't merely a task, it was a covenant. A binding contract with Marco's empire, with his secrets, with his very essence. Escape? The word tasted like ash and shattered glass in my mouth. Once these transactions were meticulously woven into the global financial tapestry, once my fingerprints, my digital signature, were etched into every single thread, there would be no severing the connection. Legal repercussions wouldn't just be a distant threat, they'd be an inescapable noose, an inevitability if I ever dared to break free, if Marco ever decided to let me fall. The cold steel of a cell, the stark reality of losing my old life, my very identity, seemed almost merciful compared to the asterisk other threat. The silent, ever-present worst that Marco never spoke of but always implied, that hung in the air between us like a suffocating, intoxicating perfume. The kind of oblivion that made prison bars seem like a distant, almost comforting dream. The fear was no longer an abstract chill, it was a concrete weight in my chest, a stone pressing against my lungs, stealing my breath. My complicity, once a creeping suspicion, was now undeniable, tattooed onto my very essence by the relentless glow of the screen. I was no longer an unwilling witness, I was an architect of the shadows, a weaver of deceit. The line, once so distinct between right and wrong, blurred and dissolved, leaving only the intoxicating, terrifying gray of Marco's world. And in this terrifying new reality, my personal safety, my very breath, was inextricably tied to his continued influence, his impenetrable shield. He had dragged me into his opulent, dangerous world, a labyrinth of power and illicit desire, and now, he was my only protector from that very world. A gilded cage, indeed, forged with my own hands. Every breath I took was now permission granted by him. Every sunrise was a stark reminder that I was still here, still under his omnipresent gaze, still undeniably, irrevocably his. The walls of my gilded prison were closing in, tighter, airless, yet within them, I felt a strange, unsettling surge of power. A recognition that his destiny was now mine, and mine, his. With each beat of my heart, I knew, with a horrifying, seductive certainty, that I was bound. Not just to the organization, but to asterisk him. My future, my past, my very soul, now indistinguishable from his dark, captivating design. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn. I was a crucial, complicit, and utterly captive piece in his grand, dangerous play. The city lights, a sprawling tapestry of fractured diamonds, mocked me from beyond the pristine glass. Each glittering shard seemed to reflect a piece of my shattered reality, a fractured landscape within my own soul. I stood there, a phantom at the window, the chill of the night seeping into my bones, yet it was the heat of my own terror, and something else. Something darker, that truly consumed me. There was no turning back. No innocent path left for me to tread. Marco had seen to that, not with chains, but with threads of silk woven so intricately into the fabric of my existence that disentangling myself felt like tearing my own flesh. Every whispered word, every searing touch, every glimpse into his shadowed empire had bound me tighter, irrevocably. I was no longer merely involved, I was implicated. A co-conspirator in a silent, deadly play, and the curtain had long since fallen on my chance for an exit. And now, a new shadow crept, not just over him, but over us. A tremor in the foundation of his carefully constructed world, a threat that, if it materialized, would engulf me just as surely as it would consume him. His enemies would not differentiate. My proximity to him, my knowledge, however incomplete, made me a target. The realization struck with the force of a physical blow, leaving me breathless. This wasn't about moral compromise anymore, it was about survival. My survival, inextricably linked to the survival of his empire, of him. My fingers traced the cold pain, mirroring the icy tendrils of fear coiling in my gut. But beneath the terror, a strange, perverse thrill still flickered. The danger, the raw power that emanated from Marco, the way he looked at me as if I were the only light in his darkness. It was a poison I had willingly, unwittingly, ingested. A part of me, the part one despised and secretly craved, recognized the perverse beauty in this inferno. It was a siren's song, luring me deeper into the abyss, promising a dark kind of belonging, a scorching intensity I had never known existed. Two paths stretched before me, both shrouded in shadows, both leading to an unrecognizable future. I could fight, scrabble and claw my way out, betraying him, betraying the dangerous connection that pulsed between us, knowing it would shatter me just as surely as it might save me. Or, I could embrace it, plunge headfirst into the abyss, become the woman he needed, the woman this world demanded. Become the darkness, become his. It meant shedding the last vestiges of who I thought I was, incinerating my former self in the fires of his ambition, his desire. My breath hitched, a silent sob caught in my throat. The city lights blurred, cares stinging my eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, terrifying acceptance. My moral compass, once a steady guide, now spun wildly, shattered beyond repair. There was no escape that wouldn't leave me a hollowed-out shell. No return to innocence, only forward, into the storm. And in that moment, standing on the precipice between annihilation and a new, terrifying becoming, I felt a shift, a definitive click deep within my soul. A terrifying clarity. My hand, trembling, pressed harder against the cold glass, a silent testament to the choice made. I would not run. I could not. I would burn. And I would burn with him.